How many of you knew that yesterday was the Nevada primary for the Republican Party? I'm sure a lot of people didn't because no one actually cared that it was happening. Why? Well, the Republican Party said they're going to be doing a caucus, in which case Donald Trump's not even on the ballot for the primary because the primary is not binding. Tomorrow will be the caucus where Donald Trump will easily win. But Nikki Haley, of course, decided to figuratively set herself aflame in public in what may be one of the most shockingly embarrassing things we have ever seen. Nikki Haley has officially lost to none. I can't predict what's going on. I have no idea. It seems like logic is out the window. Whatever we think is happening is just, it's a clown juggling for all I can tell. All of these different news stories are pointing in random directions, and there is no logical path for which any of us could follow to figure out what's going to happen come November. I could not, in my wildest of dreams, have predicted that there would be a woman so willing to publicly humiliate herself that we would get the breaking news this morning of candidate loses to none. Like, it's funny because somebody tweeted, it's official, Nikki Haley has lost to, quote, no one. And it's funny because if you were to say, like, Trump will lose to no one, you're saying, like, he can't lose. But quite literally, people voted, quote, none of these candidates over Nikki Haley. That's how bad she is. But in reality, we get what's going on. Donald Trump's name was not on the ballot. It's a non-binding primary. There's no reason to be here. There's no reason for Nikki Haley to be running at all. And here you have it, my friends. The Google primary results. Front and center. Let's zoom in to give you a good view. Nevada primary. Quote, none of these candidates wins. And I love the way it's phrased because it's like, if you... none of these candidates wins. It's like a double plural. It makes no sense because none of these candidates is the actual name for which people have voted. If they said none of these candidates have won, it would be a general statement. But no, quite literally, you were given the option in the primary to choose any one of these individuals who, for some reason, have listed themselves on this primary. And this is the result. Nikki Haley, what are you thinking doing this? 88% reporting. Nikki Haley has lost 2-1 to none. Well, I can't say I'm not having a good time, but when I look at things like this, I can't quite figure it out. Although some have speculated the reason Nikki Haley is so willing to publicly humiliate herself in this way is because she expects Donald Trump to be in prison. As many of you know, there was already a court ruling that Donald Trump does not have immunity, in which case he can be criminally charged and go to jail. It's funny. You know, I think we're seeing tremendous good news, but there is a conflict before us, and the outcome is undetermined. But we've got a bunch of other news that's positive. We have, or I should say we have at least some news that's positive. Ronna McDaniel stepping down. She is the failed RNC chair, struggling to raise any money. Republicans keep losing. And apparently Donald Trump got on the phone with her and said, it's time to go. It's time for you to step down and someone else needs to take over. Because at the very least, if you don't think it's your fault, the public certainly does, and that's bad for fundraising. Seeing Nikki Haley fail in this way, good news. Seeing Ronna McDaniel step down, good news. But then, of course, we have what happened with the failure to impeach Mayorkas. For those that are following the news, or for those that aren't, I'll explain. Last night, they wanted to get rid of DHS Secretary Mayorkas for his failures to secure the southern border. And 3 Republicans flipped to side with Democrats to burn this country to the ground. Wow. They don't care. They don't care. But I got to tell you, there's a whole bunch of, you got these Republicans complaining, you see, you got rid of Kevin McCarthy. And this is what Thomas Massey's tweeting. And I'm like, bro, if you think anyone believes that anything was getting done in Congress with Kevin McCarthy, you're sorely mistaken. And so I must say, I have no idea what to expect. And, I pointed this out before. I mean, in 2020, we have a general idea of what we think may happen based on what we're seeing. So we saw let's go back to 2020. We saw the Moody's Analytics reports showing that the economy was doing so well. I think this was 2019, sorry, when the Moody's Analytics report came out and said the economy was doing so well that Donald Trump had an open door for a landslide victory, meaning one end of the bell curve showed Donald Trump winning 49 states because of economics. Moody's takes a look at the economic factors and makes a predictions, and they don't get it wrong. For that, we had a general idea of what to expect come November 2020. What we did not factor in, which I think, predictions are not like psychic. I'm not seeing the future. We're saying based on these factors, here's what we can predict. When it came to 2020, what we did not factor in, personally what I did not factor in was ballot harvesting and the quote unquote shadow campaign, they called it, quite literally. I always got to pull this one up because there are so many people that don't believe it when I tell these Democrats or whatever. We did not factor in the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election, which Time Magazine's Molly Ball quite literally called a conspiracy unfolding behind the scenes from CEOs and activists and unions to shut out Donald Trump. That I did not factor in. And you know what? I actually was right. Now, of course, the left will try to make the claim that I was quite literally saying Trump was going to have a landslide victory, despite the fact that it was based on something like, if Moody's Analytics is correct, there's a potentiality for it. If Donald Trump were to appoint Tulsi Gabbard, there's a potentiality for it. But what I was correct on was these analytics that let's be more reasonable. I wasn't really right or wrong in a certain sense. I'm certainly wrong about many things and many things related to the election, but I'm not going to take credit for what analysts and forecast models state simply because I'm reporting on them. That's not fair for me to take credit for that. And when I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But Donald Trump ended up getting more votes than any sitting president ever. So the mistake made by myself to a great degree and by many others was that we were looking at all of these traditional economic factors, and they all suggested historically a Trump victory to some degree. Some of them, like Moody's Analytics, actually suggested Trump could win in some circumstances based on their prediction model, a landslide victory, like 49 states. And now that seemingly is, who knows, probably not. Trump did get more votes than any sitting president. But Joe Biden, of course, with the help of the shadow campaign, as Molly Ball for a conspiracy. I love this. Quite literally pulling up Time Magazine, the secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election. I mean, and how many people didn't know this story existed? I love to bring it up. A conspiracy unfolding behind the scenes, they called it. There's no way I could have factored that in. But that's a blind spot. It's a blind spot for me. And it's a blind spot for a lot of people. We did not see what was going on. Now, I assure you right now, there is a reason Nikki Haley is refusing to back down. This is a story from the AP News from February 2nd. Haley insists she's staying in the GOP race. Here's how that could cause problems for Trump. And so while we sit here, my friends, and chortle, a hearty chortle, at the fact that Nikki Haley is embarrassing herself, what she is doing is like she's asking people to lob garbage at her in public and being like, yes, please, and just being denigrated and humiliated. But you know what? We have no idea the shadow campaign that is currently going on behind the scenes. And while many predict perhaps Nikki Haley's real strategy here is that Donald Trump will be incarcerated or shut out in some way, and then she's the only player left standing. We make that prediction. We factor that in, and we still don't know what's going to happen. My point being, when we took a look at 2020 and we were like, wow, look at all these factors that suggest Donald Trump's going to win. What we were really looking at, and the mistake, I'll say this, what I was really looking at and the mistakes I made is that these factors were indicative of a Trump massive boost in voter totals, which traditionally you'd expect to be a victory. In this instance, however, there was a shadow campaign behind the scenes with mass funding from the likes of Mark Zuckerberg. Now we actually have a Democrat getting arrested in New Jersey for facilitating ballot fraud and telling people to vote when and to submit false, fraudulent mail-in votes. So I have to wonder about that. But the shadow campaign was fairly obvious. You had a mass ground game of collecting ballots from people who traditionally don't vote. You had ballot harvesting. There was an instance in North Jersey where a bundle of ballots was discovered that actually triggered the cancellation of one of their local elections. There are questions about the legality of certain circumstances in the 2020 election. And no, I'm not talking about Dominion or any of these weird voter fraud conspiracies with China or German servers. The media would like you to believe that. No, I'm talking about Texas v. Pennsylvania. Lawsuits on procedural grounds over the constitutionality of how the elections were held in certain states. There was a question over whether or not that was legally done. So it was hard to predict. Right now, we have a general idea of what Nikki Haley's trying to pull off. Donald Trump, of course, is likely going to win, but let's just say he does get incarcerated. Are we going to see any Republicans file criminal charges against Barack Obama? I say the answer is no. I say the answer is no, and it's hilarious. I mean, you take a look at New York, and you've got the district attorney. You've got these false charges filed against Donald Trump, clearly false defamation, false, all this stuff filed against Donald Trump. These cases where the judge rules summarily that these things happen, and Trump's not able to defend himself. But maybe false is not the right word. I will clarify for legal reasons. You have absurd claims made against Donald Trump that are countered in many instances of reporting, and doubt is cast upon to an extreme degree, such so that a large swath of the American public does not believe these things to be fair and true. So let me clarify. The false charges brought against Trump, I would say, to the public, they are perceivably false, and to a reasonable person, not correct. You see, we're being careful legally here. I think it's fair to be correct in the assessment because the courts have ruled against Trump. I just don't think the courts are fair, but they ruled the way they did. What will happen in the next month or so, I have no idea. So we here at Timcast are planning a live event, Super Tuesday, March 5th in Martinsburg, West Virginia, at our private location. And if you're a member at timcast.com, click join us, you will get that notification, which may actually be email only. We don't know exactly what we're going to do, but we'll give fair warning because we want to be fair. But this is a private event. It is not open to the public, which means only members will receive an invitation to buy a ticket to the event. And we are going to have a special in-person live show, West Virginia, Martinsburg. About 50 seats will be available, and it'll be at our Cast Brew location, Cast Brew Coffee. That's right. Second floor is going to be a private club where you can sit down in a nice little folding chair and watch the show and then ask questions. And I think it's going to be great. Now, the reason we plan to do the show is because it's Super Tuesday. It is the big primary day. The only issue is why? You know, look, when we had Vivek Ramaswamy and you had Ron DeSantis, we were thinking, you got these candidates that are all running. You got 4 people. We're going to see what happens on the biggest primary day. But Vivek and Ron have left. All that's left is Nikki Hillary. And she just lost to none. So I'm like, I guess we'll do the event anyway. Maybe we won't call it Super Tuesday. We'll call it like Trump nomination day or something. But perhaps Nikki Haley is part of a bigger plan. From the Financial Times, Ken Griffin casts doubt on Nikki Haley's hopes after $5 million donation. This I love. Ken Griffin gave a pro-Nikki Haley super PAC $5 million in December and January, boosting her campaign even as the hedge fund billionaire has cast doubt on her chances of winning the Republican presidential nomination. A person familiar with the matter confirmed the donations to SFA fund were made before the Iowa caucuses and New Hampshire primary. Haley's losses to Donald Trump in those contests have raised questions about donors' willingness to keep funding her campaign. Griffin, one of her top donors, admitted on CNBC that Haley's path forward was a narrower road than it was 8 weeks ago. In a separate statement on Tuesday, the Citadel founder praised the former UN ambassador's leadership record before saying that he would focus on funding Republican efforts to win control of Congress in November's election. Republicans hold the House of Representatives by only a slim majority and could flip the Senate in November. I will tell you this, my friends. The Republicans have no majority. They don't. It's a lie. The majority confers things like the speakership, which does grant some advantages. Determining the makeup of certain committees gives Republicans control of those committees. But when it comes to floor votes, you got a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing. These fake Republicans who will vote against the interests of America, who will vote to burn this country to the ground. And that's what we saw last night with the failure of the Mayorkas impeachment. Now, I do want to wrap up just the Nikki Haley presidential thing. I don't think they have no plan. I think they have a plan. Nikki Haley would not be in this race for no reason. Perhaps it's just fundraising. Maybe she's milking as much money from Democrats as possible, who are thinking, you know what, if Nikki Haley wins, then she's easier to beat in November. There's a video from CNN, of all outlets, of a guy in New Hampshire saying, I'm a Democrat. I voted in the primary for Nikki Haley to stop Donald Trump so that come the election, when I vote for Biden, Nikki Haley loses. Outright saying Nikki Haley is a sabotage vote. Maybe Nikki Haley's strategy is, I'm going to get a whole bunch of Democrats to give me money. We normally wouldn't make that money. But then what? I don't buy it. I think Nikki Haley is the bomb Iran candidate. And so that's the establishment's last hope of getting a foothold in the GOP as Donald Trump takes the whole thing over. But here we are. House vote to impeach Mayorkas fails in stunning defeat for Republican leaders. 3 Republicans defected, creating a tie vote. And then you had Blakemore, who joined the no side to allow the House GOP to bring the vote again. Some believe that once Steve Scalise is back, they're actually going to succeed in this regard. The House vote to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas failed Tuesday evening, a stunning blow to House Republicans who had pushed the effort as a key political goal. You had Ken Buck, you had Mike Gallagher, and Tom McClintock, who joined the Democrats in voting against the resolution. Blakemore joined the no side for procedural reasons. He actually agrees with the impeachment. Even though House Republicans suffered a massive defeat and failed to impeach Mayorkas on Tuesday, GOP leadership said they plan to bring it up again. So I believe the plan is, they say House Homeland Security Chairman Mark Green framed the failed vote as merely a delay in the process and said the House would vote again when Majority Leader Steve Scalise returns from receiving cancer treatments. I'm actually, I'm a bit surprised. Look, let's set aside Ken Buck, Gallagher, and McClintock's politics here and talk about, what should we call it? I mean, the scumbaggery. I love that word, by the way. Betraying Steve Scalise. Steve Scalise is out receiving cancer treatments, and these skeezy slime bags with smiles on their faces decided to put a knife in his back at one of his darkest moments. I know that, someone tried to murder the guy, but come on, have a little respect. The dude is out getting cancer treatments, and this is the time you decide to betray him? Wow, man. Let's pull up that report. It's absolutely shockingly disgusting. So let's just, here we go. All we need is look. Number 2, U.S. House Republican Scalise undergoing further cancer treatment. I'd like to say this, not professionally, outside of work, to Ken Buck, Mike Gallagher, and McClintock. You are the lowest. At a time when a man is suffering from cancer and undergoing treatments for this, is when you decide to spit in his face. Dude, if these guys came out and said, we don't care if Steve Scalise is here or not because our position is X, but the idea that Scalise could return and then they would be pressured into supporting this, the idea that they would wait until he was out for cancer treatments is just shockingly disgusting. Shockingly disgusting. Have some respect, man. I think of the the Christmas Day armistice. I think about how it was World War I. That's the story, right? World War I. And on Christmas, enemy forces climbed to the trenches and shared coffee and cocoa and threw snowballs, and they stopped killing each other because it was Christmas. Because there was something higher than them, and they knew as much as they were at odds and in this massive battle for a variety of reasons, some of them were stupid, there is something above. There is and I'm not saying religiously, but maybe there's something greater. These people, wow. I would not invite these people for coffee after a move like this. There are some things you can entertain when your chief opponent and enemy is dying. I grew up on these stories, right? I grew up more on the stories of There's the shootout between the cowboys, and the villain takes a bullet to the chest or whatever and falls down, and the good guy walks over, kneels down and says, and that's it. And the bad guy's like, you got me. And then the good guy pulls out a cigarette, hands it to the bad guy. The bad guy lights it up, and he's like, well, I guess that's it, you know? And there is still honor among enemies. These guys have no honor. They have no dignity. This is disgusting. Now, I certainly wouldn't expect, simply because someone is suffering from cancer, that you would betray your morals or otherwise. But I could certainly see them saying, at the very least, we intend to oppose the Republican Party, join the Democrats, and we're not going to do it at this moment. It's tough, I get it. But I will just say this, so be it. Perhaps there was honor in their actions in such a move. And perhaps that was joining Democrats to support a man who is burning this country to the ground is more important than the will of the American voters and those who supported the Republican Party. And there it is. Thomas Massie. He said, getting rid of Speaker McCarthy has officially turned into an unmitigated disaster. All work on separate spending bills has ceased. Spending reductions have been traded for spending increases. Warrantless spying has been temporarily extended. Our majority has shrunk. I like Thomas Massie, but he is a coin toss. He's been here before. We're fans of a lot of his work, and I can respect that. But I also, support for Kevin McCarthy is off the table. You know what? Look, Thomas Massie's a Republican. I am not a Republican. I can't stand Republicans. I have more respect for Democrats than I do Republicans. I just think Democrats are evil. But I have more respect for them because of their willingness, their vigor. You ain't going to tell me that the squad, for instance, don't have a fire in their bellies. The Democrats are willing to burn everything to the ground to get what they want. And I respect it. I don't like it, but I respect it. Republicans are Democrats going the speed limit. I don't even know if that's fair to say. That would be like they got a fire in their bellies, but they're not going fast enough to get the job done. No, in this instance, Republicans are low T, whiny losers who can't do anything. It's laughably absurd. The Democrats will stand behind murderers, rapists, pedophiles, former Klan members, and the Republicans can't even defend our southern border. Thomas Massie wants me to defend Speaker McCarthy. Ain't never gonna happen. The establishment garbage. You know what? All of them need to be voted out in November. I don't see it happening. But my friends, I tell you this. I would accept defeat of the Republican Party 100%. And I don't care who wins. Let it be Democrats. Because we're not getting the change we need in this way. And perhaps the only path forward is overt resistance. And so I kind of view it like this. The idea that we could support the likes of Thomas Massie for re-election and others who would toe the line for the machine. Not always. Massey's really great on a lot of issues. But those who would say, just let the machine keep churning. I say, get out. Yeah, but without me, the machine goes full speed ahead. I'm like, and with you, it's going a little bit slower. Why are we wasting our time pretending like our options are the machine or the machine light? How about we take the machine if that's what we get, but we start trying to get something different? And I think we have that with the likes of Matt Gaetz, Donald Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Rand Paul's fantastic. Thomas Massie is pretty good. But just because he said good things and voted on things that are done right does not mean I will respect support for him. And I actually would say support for McCarthy in this way and during the election, I'm just done. I am done with it. In which case I say they all must be voted out. I would rather the Republicans lose everything. Because at the very least, then you get some kind of unity opposition. But where are we currently at? What are we looking at right now with everything that's going on? Have the Republicans launched any kind of meaningful work? Maybe a little bit here and there. The Weaponization Committee has uncovered some important things. Okay. Where's the May 29th committee on the insurrection at the White House in 2020. Why don't Republicans ever talk about that? Not a single one. Because they're losers. Because they are losers. Now, with respect to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, Elise Stefanik, for instance, there are a handful. Sorry if I'm excluding you, but there are many who actually do a pretty good job. But I got to tell you, man, it is fascinating to me that I can sit here hearing Democrats say things like the Second Amendment never intended to protect your right to keep and bear arms. Personally, it was talking about militias controlled by the government, and you can't have cannons, and you can't have this. And I'm like, the Founding Fathers commissioned corsairs and privateers. Privateers, warships owned by private individuals. The government did not control what a private individual could build. And so there were pirates. Pirates were people who owned their own massive warships. And they would be conscripted or given letters of marque to go disrupt enemy lines. People owned cannons. Yes, individuals owned guns. And they'd let their children use them. Heavens me. In olden days, the kitchen had a musket. And they would grab it off the wall, open the back door, and shoot a critter to throw it in a stew. Isn't that kind of wild? Seriously. You know, when I go outside, there's rabbits everywhere. They'd literally grab a gun. They would open the person making dinner. This is crazy because you go to Virginia. I went to, I think it was Jackson's house. I think it was Jackson, Confederate. And there's a gun on the wall. And they would open the door, point the musket out, bang, blast a critter, and then throw them in a stew. I hear Democrats say, no one can have guns. Never allowed. And I'm like, everybody had guns. Guns hanging in their kitchen for anyone to just grab and use. They weren't in a militia. And then the Republicans come here. And I asked the Republicans, does the Second Amendment allow you to have a warship? No. A cannon? No. A nuclear weapon? No. Biological weapons? No. In fact, my friends, that is all wrong. The Second Amendment does protect the right of the individual, including children, to keep and bear arms. It has already been decided by the Supreme Court that children are protected at the same constitutional rights, with limitations via due process. And it is true, in fact, that children are allowed to bear arms under certain circumstances. We've just set restrictions on how and when that can be done. But in many places, like we saw this in Wisconsin, if you are a minor, you can actually keep and bear a rifle in certain circumstances and walk around by yourself without supervision. It's true. And I know people don't like the idea that people could keep and bear nuclear weapons or biological weapons, but the Second Amendment never made a distinction. And people owned warships capable of decimating an entire coastal city. So you tell me nuclear weapons are not included in that, you're wrong. By all means, due process can change it. But here's my point. I don't want anybody to have nukes. I don't want anybody to have biological weapons. The point is, Republicans collapse into balls of jelly whenever confronted. At least in my day. I can't speak to the years past or whatever. Republicans did a bang-up job during the Civil War, shutting down slavery and winning. But now, pure jelly-need weakness. The Democrats are like, we want to ban this gun for no reason. The Republicans are like, well, okay, I guess. Absolute slime ball, pathetic behavior. So you know what? I don't care. That's why I'm saying, yeah, vote for Trump. And everyone's like, what about this thing he's done and that thing? I don't care. Your machine is broken. You are spineless jellyfish coward, all of you. And Donald Trump is not even as aggressive as I'd like someone to be. No, I mean it. Heaven forbid someone like me ever got in government. I'd probably get impeached right away or removed or whatever, because I would never want to run. And that's the issue, I suppose. You know, I was talking about Customs and Border Protection, how they're facilitating human smuggling, how I've watched the videos of them open the barriers and let criminal aliens in. They've snipped the razor wire to allow these people in. Well, they don't have to. They could literally just be like, no. The border barrier has secured the border. Let's put concertina wire and shipping containers across the entirety of the border and make a little makeshift barrier. And we'll do our best. You know, we don't got to build a big, beautiful wall from sea to shining sea. But how about we secure the border? No, the CBP says we're going to facilitate this. If I was governor of West Virginia, if I was AG, if I had any kind of law enforcement powers, the CBP facility on 340 off in West Virginia would be raided by state forces and placed under investigation by the state to start ripping through their communications to determine to what degree Customs and Border Protection is working with cartels and facilitating human smuggling. And they say, Tim, you wouldn't have the ability to do so. Oh, I don't. You have no idea. I would not last a day in office. I would publicly just say it. I would come out on TV and say, as governor, I demand the law enforcement apparatus of this state investigate what these people are doing in concert with those that are working on the border. I just don't stand for it. I'm sick of it. The facilitation of human smuggling by Customs and Border Protection and the union defending this border amnesty bill, the abject betrayal of the American people. And there is not a single spine to be found. But I'll give you a better one. The moment I step foot in any one of those offices, which will never happen, I assure you, the first thing I do, if it were right now, criminal charges against Barack Obama for the extrajudicial assassination of Anwar al-Awlaki. Now, to be fair, a criminal investigation. I believe in due process. I believe in the Constitution. I believe there are legitimate arguments as to the military powers of the president. But if they want to say the president is not immune over the actions he took while in his official duties, I would absolutely love to play your game. And I would say, okay, an American citizen was murdered by a sitting president. Charges. By all means, go ahead and argue jurisdiction. I don't know. I don't care. Maybe I lose in the courts, but I'd do it anyway. That's the way it's got to be done. New York. They are bringing charges against Trump for fraud. Trump's lenders have said, there's no fraud here. He did everything right. It's normal business practice and he made us money. And they said, we don't care. Where's a single Republican to do anything? Okay, criminal charge against Joe Biden over Burisma. We have more than enough evidence. There already exists more than enough evidence. The actions taken by Joe Biden were unconstitutional, illegal. I can break it all down for you. The phone call made by Hunter Biden's people to D.C. saying we need help. And then a few months later, I believe it was like later in the year, Joe Biden flies to Ukraine and says, if you don't fire the prosecutor, you're not getting $1 billion. Call the president, ask him on video saying it. At minimum, criminal investigation. And then we bring it to a grand jury. I'm going to tell you this. I certainly believe a grand jury would return an indictment. Indictment is not a guilty verdict. It looks like there's enough evidence to say this guy committed a crime. And then you bring it to a jury to determine whether or not that crime was committed. Where? Where is anyone? Where is anyone to do anything? Man, you know what? This is why I just feel like at some point, I think we all just ride off into the sunset. Because if the best we can muster up is Thomas Massey, look, I like the guy. He's got the Klux capacitor, his little chicken machine that he built, solar powered, moves chicken coop around. He's got good policy on spending. Julian Assange, abolishing government departments. I expect all that. But then he drops to his knees for the machine and says, this is the way, my friends. And I say, no, the way forward is voting out every single incumbent with some exceptions. Like Matt Gaetz, he's cool. Marjorie Taylor Greene. Lauren Boebert's pretty cool. I respect Boebert. I think, there's some animosity between her and like Marjorie and, far from perfect. Elise Stefanik, I like. I like Ro Khanna. He's a Democrat. I do. Far from perfect. Absolutely. But there's some I'd say, I give them a shot. But we got to just vote all of them out. How do we muster that up? I don't know, man. I suppose we can only sit back, wait and see. And we will. Yeah, it is what it is. I don't know that we'll ever get a leader strong enough. Donald Trump is not that leader. Donald Trump is the best we have. He's worth supporting. And I do believe he will do a better job this time around. And I do believe he's the best president of my lifetime. But I don't believe he's the perfect candidate. I think that's fairly obvious. I'll take what I can get for now. In the meantime, Congress is worthless. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.